At more than 1,000 meters above sea level in the highlands of Armenia sit more than 100 ancient megalithic stelae, which are referred to locally as Vishaps, a term associated with a mythological dragon. Decorated with animal imagery, although nothing dragon-related, some of these stelae are 5 meters in height, and many are located as high as 3,000 meters above sea level. Research over the years has attempted to document and date all known Vishaps, as well as to suggest a function for them. A recent study published in the journal MPJ Heritage Science has gone one step further and found some interesting associations between the Vishaps and their surrounding environments. The Armenian highlands are located in the northern part of the Fertile Crescent, the area where farming first began. They were home to multiple ancient societies over a very long period of time, during both the Neolithic between 10,000 and 5200 BCE and the Chalcolithic, also known as the Copper Age, between 5200 and 3500 BCE. The area was characterized by an agro-pastoral way of life. Several agricultural traditions followed during the Middle Bronze Age, and by the early Iron Age, more complex societies had emerged. The more sophisticated Urartu kingdom was established in the Middle Iron Age, with this culture using cuneiform script and building fortresses, temples, and rock-cut tombs. Pinpointing exactly which of the many highland cultures had erected the Vishaps has been a goal of several research projects. The Vishaps are located on summer pasture land and sit between 1,000 and 3,000 meters above sea level. They measure between 1.1 and 5.5 meters in height and are mostly made out of locally available stones such as andesite and basalt. Although they are classed as megalithic monuments, they differ from European menhirs in the way that they are carved into animal forms and are considered more like statues. In Armenia, menhirs and megalithic alignments similar to those in Europe also exist in addition to Vishaps. One of the most notable sites is Karahunge, also known as Zorets-Kaher, and often referred to as the Armenian Stonehenge. It's made up of more than 200 standing stones and consists of a circle, several rows, and separate menhirs. 1/3 of these standing stones have circular holes carved all the way through them, so it's been suggested that Karahunge may have been some sort of astronomical observatory. Burial kists are also located around the monument, and it's thought to date to the Middle Bronze Age. Limited research has been done on the Vishaps. However, the work that has been carried out has found some interesting correlations. An early 20th century archaeologist, Ashkarbek Kalantar, noticed that Vishaps appear to demarcate prehistoric irrigation systems. In 2012, a collaborative project was started between the Institute of Archaeology and Ethnography, National Academy of Sciences Armenia, and the Free University of Berlin, with the Kavoskari University of Venice joining later. The goal of this project was to understand the function of and socioeconomic background behind the construction of the Vishaps, using landscape surveys and some selective excavation. This research found that Vishaps are associated with artificial platforms that have been built out of medium-sized unworked stones and are located close to other ancient archaeological features such as cairns, cromlechs, tombs, petroglyphs, settlements, and campsites. Not all Vishaps were found in situ, but it was possible to determine their original locations. Some Vishaps are found alone, but others have been erected in clusters. The project led to the excavation of the archaeological site of Trinkatar, where 46 organic samples were collected and radiocarbon dated. These established that Trinkatar had been used as a campsite since the Neolithic from the end of the 6th millennium BCE onwards. 2 of these samples were associated with Vishaps and produced dates between 4200 and 4000 BCE. This means that the Vishaps at the site of Trinkatar are Chalcolithic. It doesn't necessarily mean that all the Vishaps across the highlands date to the same time period as those at Trinkatar, but does suggest that they were a Chalcolithic phenomenon. Later additions to the site of Trinkatar include aggregated cell structures, cromlechs, cairns, barrows, and petroglyphs in the 2nd millennium BCE. So this Vishaps site in particular was in use before the erection of the stele and afterwards, and was associated with settlement, burial, and symbolic behavior. This previous research also noted that Vishaps are mostly situated in well-defined meadows inside ancient satellite volcanic craters. These meadows are water-sodden and some could be considered as marshy. Researchers have divided Vishaps into 3 categories based on their carvings. The first category is piscis, the Latin for fish, because these stele have been shaped and polished into the form of a fish and recognizable fish features have been carved into them. The second category is vellus, the Latin for hide, because these stones have been shaped to look like stretched or draped bovid hides. The third category is termed hybrida because these stele are a combination of the piscis and vellus styles. Although many of the Vishaps have been found lying horizontally on the ground, the fact that the tail ends of them are undecorated but all of the faces are carved suggests that they were once upstanding. Earlier research revealed that the typology and size were not correlated since all 3 categories contain stones at a variety of heights. It also determined that the mean altitude of the fish stele was much higher at 2,796 meters above sea level than the mean altitude of the hide stele at 2,493 meters. Also, 15% of vellus Vishaps are located below 2,000 meters, whereas there is not one piscis Vishap lower than this altitude. In the new study, researchers carried out a statistical analysis of the Vishaps' sizes and elevations to determine how much effort went into erecting them and to suggest a possible function related to this effort. The analysis covered 115 documented Vishaps. In the Armenian highlands, few structures that require a lot of labour to build them are located close to the snow line, which means where there is perennial snow cover. For example, churches are located in valleys, and megaliths, which are less labour intensive to construct than churches, are situated on higher ground. The researchers considered the amount of labour that would have been required to create a Vishap, which included quarrying, processing, carving, polishing, and transporting the stele. Since such endeavours at high altitude would have been more challenging because of snow cover, only short periods of time would have been snow-free, and because of the distance required to supply workers and food, it was hypothesized that only small Vishaps would be found up there. However, large monuments are also found at high altitudes. These are often associated with prehistoric irrigation systems, which means that their locations were intentionally chosen, and transportation of stele weighing in some cases more than 6 tons to these areas had to be carried out at some effort. Overall, the Vishaps have a bimodal distribution, with them peaking at 1,900 meters and 2,700 meters above sea level. These altitudes have very different levels of snow, so the time during which human activity can take place at them varies considerably. They are not located in one cluster at each altitude, but over vast areas, which, once again, means a lot of effort was made to place them at specific locations. The authors of the paper suggest that the motivation behind erecting Vishaps at high altitudes may have been connected to a water cult. Snow melting on these summits provides water, a life-sustaining force, to the valleys below. As mentioned before, these locations also have prehistoric irrigation systems and many other water sources such as rivers and lakes. Since the fish Vishaps are mostly found at high altitude, a water cult also explains why fish forms were chosen for these particular stele. An interesting comparison is made between Mount Aragat in the Gegharma Mountains and Mount Ararat. The summits of Mount Aragat and the Gegharma Mountains are major snow depositories and have rivers and lakes, as well as many archaeological monuments. However, Mount Ararat has a different environment with limited water availability and porous soils, and it also has a lot less archaeological features on its slopes. So this suggests that an ancient water cult concentrated its cultural artifacts close to abundant water sources. Overall, the analysis of the Vishaps points towards their location and form having been related to ancient cult beliefs which were likely rooted in practical considerations. During the Chalcolithic, the agro-pastoral community that lived in the highlands was heavily reliant on fertile, well-irrigated soil, and the Vishaps likely played a significant role in their lives because they had a symbolic connection to water. These people put an enormous amount of effort into quarrying, carving, and transporting Vishaps across vast distances and at varying altitudes. Although the research suggests an association between a water court and the Piscis Vishaps, it doesn't really talk much about the Veles Vishaps. But with their bovid form and the fact that they were erected at lower altitudes, it could be suggested that they were put up at the locations where animals grazed and were symbolic of the importance these animals had to the Chalcolithic community. Let me know what you think about the Vishaps in the comments below. That's it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.